bad guy.
So that's it, folks. The regular season in the NFL is in the bag. We are now heading towards playoff football. And to break down what was a fairly anticlimactic week 18 in the NFL, I'm sorry to big it up so much already, is me and my good friend Eddie Ekwo. Welcome to Across the Gridiron. Eddie, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. You know, it's a bittersweet moment, right? Because teams have finished regular football, and now it's the serious boys, the grown-ups, are now in the dance. The playoffs is here, and it means it's the last time I'll see the Dallas Cowboys play. You know, this side of football for a long time, but I'm glad to be here. And guys, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And we appreciate all of you for coming back. But yeah, the games were very strange, Matt. They were maybe it was the fact that a lot has been sorted before that last game. And obviously there were only two games that really mattered for the playoffs. But it wasn't with two teams that everyone was very excited about because of the records that those two teams were kind of coming into the game with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, if anybody is still watching this after my epically bad intro this week, I appreciate you. But yeah, I think this weekend, I think what was interesting, what made it maybe less interesting, I should say, is it wasn't really about who can get into the playoffs and who's not going to get into the playoffs. It was about seedings, right? And you either have to be an absolute diehard statistician within the NFL fan base, or you have to be supportive on those teams to really care. If you see what I mean, like I don't care if Buffalo was 7th seed or 5th seed or 6th seed. I don't really care who gets the whoever gets the 1st seed, great, they get a bye. But home field advantage, couldn't care less. But the one thing this weekend did throw up, there was one obviously main story. There was one big game, and so should we just dive straight into it?
Yeah.
So we're talking about Dallas losing to New York. Is that right, Eddie? Is that what we're gonna? Is that what we're gonna start?
Was that this weekend? Did that happen this weekend?
Hey, you're a brave man. You're still wearing all the jersey, mate. You're still wearing the jersey.
Honestly, I did watch that game, and I thought to myself, honestly, why? Like there's joke organizations, right, that care for anything but football. And the funny thing is, what? After the game, I was seeing like lots of Giant fans, who were like, "Where was all this during the season?" I'm like, just calm down. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Like, you won 2 games at the end of the season where against teams that don't really care. They're just, everyone is just on their way out. So don't take this to heart. And of course, you played the Dallas defense, which everyone has really been a superstar. Like every quarterback has looked good playing the Dallas defense. So
well, look.
Calm down.
Yeah, it's hard. Let's not give it a big one when you're in a losing record. But it was, but yeah, I say in jest, of course. Look, the big game going into the weekend was, of course, the place in the AFC, basically the battle for 4th place for the 4th seed, and this was Baltimore,
Kings of the North.
Exactly, who was going to be the King of the North in the AFC North. And it was a winner takes all, loser goes home match between the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. We both went for the Ravens in our predictions, I think, didn't we? And more to fool us. This was an absolutely. I wouldn't go as far as call it an epic game of football, because there was. I don't think that each team played well enough for it to be an epic game. But I watched the highlights this morning because it was on at like 1 o'clock in the morning UK time, and there was no way I was staying up for that. But I watched the highlights, not knowing the way the score was going, or who actually won. And my God, the ending of that game, there was about 3 or 4 times I thought, okay, this is game over. But Baltimore came out on fire. I think they went 10-0 up, and you think, okay, Green Bay Pittsburgh just can't get into it. All of a sudden, Aaron Rodgers comes back, and they start the third quarter like a house on fire. After making, I thought it was a really questionable decision going into the last couple of seconds of the half, where they could have taken a field goal to get some points and leveled up. They went for the touchdown and didn't make it. So, okay, is that going to be a momentum changer? But they came flying out in the third quarter. Baltimore couldn't do anything about it. And then the fourth quarter was back and forth. You think, and it ended up, going into that fourth quarter, Aaron Rodgers takes the field down. He was proving his money's worth, shall we say, towards the back end of that fourth quarter. They have the go-ahead touchdown, but then they miss the single point conversion. So they were 2 points up. We think, okay, now surely all Lamar's got to do is get the ball down there, get in field goal range to win the match and go through. They do that, and then they miss a field goal. It was an absolutely epic sort of end to that game. But the long and short of it, Pittsburgh go through to the playoffs. Baltimore, who were one of the contenders, Super Bowl contenders in the AFC, don't make it. First time in a few years they haven't made the playoffs. But I mean,
2021.
I mean, it was too crazy for me to. I mean, I've tried to summarize it there, and I've done a pretty poor job of it because it was just so hard to explain. But I mean, Eddie, what do you make of this game?
This game, there was so many unforced errors in this game. It was just ridiculous. And you saw two teams that were literally fighting for their lives, right? Baltimore Ravens were fighting to reclaim what was a lost season a long time ago. Because I mean, if you look at the way the Ravens started this season, I don't think anyone would have predicted that they would be in with a chance to get into the playoffs. And I don't think anyone would have been looking at them and saying if they go into the playoffs, they would deserve to be in the playoffs because they were atrocious, at the start of the season. And then Lamar got injured and they were even worse, right? And so you kind of went into this game, normally you're excited to see Lamar Jackson play, but I don't think there were a lot of people, at least not for me. I didn't watch that game with like excitement, thinking about, Lamar playing and all the stuff that he could do because he hadn't really generated that excitement, the few times we've seen him play this season. And, when we're talking about this game, we're talking about, Derrick Henry, right? What they needed to do. And it almost seems like they listened to us because in the first, couple of quarters, they were feeding Derrick Henry, heavily. And then they moved away from it. And it's like the whole, you can sum up the Ravens' frustration in just that game, right? Where you can see the good of Henry. Like every time he was touching the ball, like near every time he was like taking it for distance, bulldozing people, getting first down. And then they went away from him. And I'm just like, honestly, I'm not an NFL coach, but I'm just a fan that is just sitting there. And just from the entertainment purposes, just look at what Henry was doing. Like he was scaring people. People were afraid to tackle the man. They were like, I don't want any of that business, towards the end of the season. I'm about to go on my holidays or anything. So, I mean, that was a reflection of the Ravens and in not such a great light in that game. And of course, the game was close, so honestly, we could be sitting here talking about the Ravens in the playoffs, but then also admitting that they're probably going to be one and done because I don't really see them, looking at the other teams that are in the playoffs now. I think there are a lot better teams than the Ravens. And so, they're not going to go far. The Steelers, on the other hand, have a very unique story with it but they are basically the same team, but with better presentation. In the sense that you've got this whole Aaron Rodgers phenomenon thing, that is going on with the Steelers, right? The whole redemption arc of Aaron Rodgers, playing out, left Green Bay, went to the Jets, was disastrous. Mike Tomlin was basically waiting and waiting and waiting for Aaron Rodgers to make a decision to come to the Steelers. And everyone was like, what are you doing? You don't have any quarterback. We're waiting for Aaron Rodgers, right? So it felt like this game was like a vindication of, this is why we waited for Aaron Rodgers. This is why, we did all of that to get him, because if there was anyone that was going to stand in the fourth quarter, to do things to win a game, is Aaron Rodgers, because we've seen him do it time and time again. And trust me, as a Dallas Cowboys, we've been on the hands of, the receiving end of Aaron Rodgers way too many times. So I have a personal close relationship about what Aaron Rodgers can do in the fourth quarter. But, some of the throws that he was making in that fourth quarter was like, Aaron Rodgers-esque. It was like, okay, are we seeing something here? And at some point, when he threw that touchdown, and I was thinking, oh wow, okay, this is happening, right? He's literally, gonna do this. But then there was time on the clock, and I was like, Aaron Rodgers is gonna get Aaron Rodgers, because this is usually what everybody always talks about, that you don't leave time on the clock when you want to give the ball to Aaron Rodgers, because he will literally march down the field, and win the game. So it would have been quite a funny story, if that walk-off field goal by the Ravens had actually won the game, because it's almost like comes full circle. What Aaron Rodgers used to do to teams time and time again, they did it to him on his way out of the NFL. Because I know he's been talking a little bit like he's gonna come back, because the last interview before this game, they were asking him about his reflection on the season and stuff like that. And he was saying something like he's always better than year two in an offense. That in year two with LaFleur, he was a little bit better. So kind of making you think, well, is he trying to suggest that he's going to come back again? If they had lost that game, I don't know if he would have killed that idea of ever coming back and just thinking, you know what, let me just retire. But now Aaron Rodgers now goes into the playoff, and everyone is going to be optimistic that he's going to turn on the magic. In the playoffs, I don't know if that's going to happen, because I think they're being paired with the Texans. I think that's probably going to end quite badly, because the Texans defense is no joke. But, in that game, I just thought it was kind of sad in a way, to see those two teams, just play and slug it out, considering what they used to be in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a couple of really interesting points there. I think we just talk about Aaron Rodgers for a second. I think you're right. I think this victory, I mean, he's indicated that he's willing to stay on for a second season. I think a lot of that might be dependent on whether Mike Tomlin's still in a job. And I don't think Mike Tomlin would still be in a job if they had lost this game. I think Mike Tomlin has, he's got a huge amount of credit in the bank, but a lot of the fans, wasn't that long ago that the fans were chanting to fire Tomlin, right? And they had a really sticky patch. And to give the Steelers credit, they've certainly come into they've certainly ended the season in a much better form. I think they've won 4 of the last 5, but then they blew the chance to make the playoffs off their own back when they lost to Cleveland last week.
Yeah.
Right. So there's inconsistencies there. And obviously they went into this game without the number 1 receiver in Metcalf.
DK Metcalf, yeah.
Yeah. But I think we're back for the playoffs. Yeah. But I think what Rodgers showed is that in the clutch, he can still deliver. He had to do it twice.
Yeah.
If I think that sort of fourth quarter, the last few drives of that fourth quarter kind of showed the best and the worst of Pittsburgh in a way. And this is why, this is where things could potentially begin to unravel in the playoffs, and I'm sure we'll do a proper preview of the wildcard week later on in the week. But Rodgers takes the ball up, drives them forward, and they get that go ahead touchdown, right, with a matter of, I think, about 2 minutes remaining. But all of a sudden, then it comes to give the Ravens a chance. They absolutely blew a coverage, blown coverage. It's like I've never seen a bigger gap at the back for Baltimore to then go ahead again, and the ball goes back to Rodgers, and once again he drives them forward. So again, that shows the best and the worst of Pittsburgh. There, it shows that in the clutch, Rodgers still has the ability to drive teams forward, but there were just the inconsistencies at the back there. It's not going to, they can go into the playoffs, and those mistakes, those blown coverages, are going to be punished a lot more, especially when you play against a Houston team who's, their defense could ruin anybody's season. Over the course of the game. But I do think this victory gives a stay of execution to Tomlin. It gives a stay of execution to Rodgers as well, and I think they'll probably both line up for Pittsburgh next season. And I think after that season, and then I think it's, when you go into the 2027 season, then I think it's time for them to make a decision. I think. Yeah.
I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers are not notorious for firing coaches. So
they never have they?
No, I don't think they have. Usually, the coaches decide to walk away. And, sometimes you look at Mike Tomlin and you think, could he walk away? But Mike Tomlin strikes me as someone that he's been stuck in that relationship for so long that I'm not sure he knows what relationships look like with any other teams, so it's kind of one of those where, and I'm sure there'll be lots of coaches that would take him in a heartbeat. I think about the Atlanta Falcons, right? They've got a decent team, right? And they just need a coach that can, put it together. So, could that be a place he goes to if it doesn't work in Steelers? Because maybe they both need a change of
a fresh start. You're right. But I think we knew going into the season that the Pittsburgh Steelers' success in this season is going to be judged by the playoffs.
Yeah,
they've been one and done for too long. They are a good team, but they're an imperfect team. They're an inconsistent team. They're probably not favorites going in against Houston, who are the informed team in the NFL in terms of winning streak at the moment. But the AFC is just wide open. I still think it's wide open, and because I don't think the number one team or the number two team in the AFC are the best teams in the AFC. Right. So would it surprise me that the Steelers make a run to the Super Bowl? Probably not, because again, I just think the division is so wide open. But let's turn our attention, and we've talked about Pittsburgh. Well, what do you think what does this mean to Baltimore then? Right. They've had such a good run. They have had such an inconsistent season. At first it was beginning of season, the defense was so poor. They were losing games because of their awful defense. Then they started picking up a few games, and Lamar got injured. We talked about Derrick Henry, not be given the ball, but then he started to be given the ball. He's racking up, triple digit yards in games now. But this is a disappointment, because again, with Buffalo not being as strong as they are, with Pittsburgh not being as good as they are, with the Chiefs out, with the Bengals out, this was a good opportunity that's missed for Baltimore. Where do you think they go next?
I think the big question is going to be about Lamar Jackson, his contract. And you started hearing the players singing his praises, about, as long as we have Lamar Jackson, we can win a Super Bowl, and I think it was one of the Pro Bowl players who was saying that when they were cleaning out stuff and they're doing the usual interviews, and the news were coming out about how everyone was just all raving about Lamar Jackson. So clearly, the locker room is behind him. And, the Raven organization have got some decisions that they've got to make, right? And it's funny because this is kind of the conversation we're having the last time that he had a contract situation. Are they going to pay Lamar Jackson? Are they going to trade Lamar Jackson? How many, picks are people going to give up, to get Lamar Jackson? And it doesn't help the fact that he represents himself, so, clearly a lot of people don't necessarily like that, so that whole conversation is always tented one way or the other. So the Ravens have got that decision to make about Lamar Jackson. Then they've got a decision to make about their coach too, as well, John Harbaugh. And people have been calling for his head. Almost like he's taking the Ravens as far as he can go. If you keep Lamar Jackson, have you wasted his prime years? Of making it to the Super Bowl? And all of that. Do you need another coach to actually get them over the line? Because I don't think they've actually gotten to an AFC championship, since Lamar Jackson started playing. And with all the things that people have said, about my quarterback, Dak Prescott, they probably have the same record in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson, even though Lamar Jackson has won 2 unanimous MVP, and you can't take that away from him. And then you look at their squad, like the defense was only just marginally better. I mean, they started to play better a little bit, somewhere towards the end of the season, but it was still a very bad defense, right? And it's not a defense that can take you to a championship. So
No.
you've got that, so there's got all of that. And maybe going out and not making the playoffs might be a blessing in disguise for Baltimore Ravens, especially for next season. Because I think if they made it to the playoffs, it would have papered over a lot of cracks. And let's say they won one game, they would have thought, "Ooh, okay, maybe we're decent." And, they would have a draft position that perhaps might not allow them to get good players, because I think they need to restock in the draft. So, I mean, it means for the Ravens that they can look at themselves, critically and say, well, did we just miss this playoffs to allow us to become a better team next season?
Mhm.
And, if we can resolve the Lamar, the coach defense, we could be back next season. And I think the Chiefs also not making the playoffs is kind of giving everybody a pass, so to speak. It's almost like, well, the Chiefs didn't make it, so misery loves company, right? So we're not too bad, because the Chiefs didn't make the playoffs as well. So yeah.
Yeah. I think the problem with the Ravens, they haven't really played complementary football all season, have they? Right.
No.
There's just been too many times when the offense showed up, but the defense didn't. And when the defense showed up, the offense didn't. Right. And even today, and they went 10-zip up, but then the offense went cold. They were defending well until Kyle Hamilton got injured and he was taken out the game.
Yeah.
And when he was taken out the game, 10-3. As soon as he was out, they lost all defensive stability. Aaron Rodgers, who obviously we've already talked about, just sort of took over from there. And I feel really sorry. I know it's a game. I know this is the sport, but I don't half feel sorry for Tyler Loop, the kicker. Even in that situation, rookie kicker, 5th round pick, I think. But he's never had to kick a winning field goal all season, right? And that's the job, that's the pressure. He knows what he's getting into.
Yeah.
But to come in that, your whole season rides on that, and he knew as soon as he kicked it, he just miskicked it, and it must be absolutely sucks for him. He's obviously taken over from Tucker this season. Big shoes to fill, pardon the pun.
Yeah.
And it hasn't worked out for him. But look, the Ravens, I think they've got a lot to think about. same with the Chiefs. They've got a lot of things to think about. The fact that they came so close, you lose to a big divisional rival like that. We knew it was always to be a close game. I think every game that these guys have had have always been like one score games, so it was always going to be close. But a lot for those guys to think about across the pitch. But let's move on. That was the game of the weekend. I said after that, it was pretty much playing for seedings, apart from in the NFC South, where there was a bit of a showdown between Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Carolina Panthers to see who would top the NFC South. Tampa Bay beat Carolina on Saturday, but then because the Falcons beat the the Panthers still went through and top that division. But I mean, that is very much, it's the lowest of low fourth seeds, I think, to be fair, in the NFC. So we don't need to dive too much on that. And I don't think we need to go through too many games on an individual basis. So, but let's look at how the sort of the seeds or the playoffs are sort of shaping up. And if let's stay with the AFC, because that's kind of where we started, and let's look at the number one seed, which is going to be the Denver Broncos, beat a pretty depleted, or shall we say rested, LA Chargers team. It wasn't a dominating performance like some people were expecting, but they won. They took that top seed. They get a bye next week. How do you think then? How do you think Denver are looking?
I mean, it was just more of a momentum thing, right? It's that kind of a season, it's that time of the season, right, where I think they've played this season perfectly, right? They've had, their losses have come at times where it does nothing to affect either confidence or form or playoff scenarios, right? So they had their first couple of losses very early on in the season where nothing is decided, doesn't matter. You lose 2 games in the bounce in your first 5 games. No harm done, right? Then they went on this massive run of winning games. And then they had another reset, 2 games to the end of the season where they lost another game. And that's kind of like the perfect time to lose a game, because you lose the game, you get that shock of a loss, but then you now have, a few games to kind of like, kind of shake it off, right? Mm-hmm. And then you play the Chiefs, and then you play a Chargers team, and then you correct your mistake, and then you go into the playoffs, not having a loss, in the taste of your mouth, because sometimes, right, that in itself is hard to shake, right? You lose your last game going to the playoffs, and even though you rested all your starters, but you potentially, especially with a number 1 seed where you've got to bye, your players are sitting home for almost 3 weeks before their next competitive game. So you play that last game of the season with a bunch of starters. So the starters, a bunch of non-starters. So the starters know they're not going to play that week. So you've got that whole week, right, where they've done nothing. And then you've got the next week of the playoffs, which they're sitting at home before they then play the next weekend. So it's like, you could almost lose some of those habits, that now you're having a bit of a disconnection where you're thinking, that loss, is that really telling me something that we need to fix something this big or that big, or we forget about the loss and then we're just going to hop back, in the field and it's business as usual. So winning that last game, with being able to play some starters, and rest some starters, and then coming up with a win, it just keeps that momentum going, for the Broncos going to the playoffs. So, I think, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask, is there a concern though for Denver, because on going forward, when I say going forward, I mean on offense. So the only touchdown they scored on Sunday was for a pick six.
Yeah,
it's an interception. The rest are field goals.
Yeah.
Now they started most of their offensive line, but Bo Nix was still sacked 4 times, and he didn't throw and he didn't throw a touchdown. The rest were just field goals and positions and that kind of stuff. Would that cause you? Would that be potential cause for concern? Now, things with Bo Nix is obviously he's in his second year. He's got to the playoffs twice. All looks good. That all sounds great. But do we think that they are a team who can, despite the fact that they're being first seed, do we really think they're Super Bowl contenders with that kind of offensive line? Well, that offensive team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about, and it really depends on who gets to the Super Bowl from the NFC side, right? But I think that the Broncos could get to the Super Bowl because, sometimes, getting into the Super Bowl is not having the best quarterback. It's not having the best overall team. It's having something that is a strength in your team, right? And if your strength can, compensate for a lot of your weaknesses, then you've got a chance of going far. Like, Bo Nix didn't throw for, ridiculous amount of yards. I don't even think he broke 4,000 yards, this season. Compared to like lots of quarterbacks that are probably sitting at home right now who probably broke 4,000 yards. So you're like, okay, that's a good quarterback. It's got all the passing stats and everything. But what they do have is a ridiculously good defense, right? And the last time the Broncos went to the Super Bowl, they did it on the back of the defense. Because if you remember, Peyton Manning, he wasn't great, in that lead up to the Super Bowl. I think there was a game where he didn't even throw a touchdown. But literally that defense was just ridiculous. So they've got a clear strength, which is their defense. And if that defense shows up on any day, they can cause problems. And then all Bo Nix just needs to do is don't make mistakes. Don't give the ball to the opposition team, and let them, don't give them short field positions, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think I look at the Broncos. They are not sexy. They're definitely not the team that I would say would want to go to the Super Bowl and win. But you've kind of got to look at their characteristics and say, yeah, they might just do it.
No, look, I mean, they're the first seed for a reason. Let's just wrap up the rest of the AFC then. So, and look at how the playoffs look. So, as we talk about Denver, they've claimed the first seed. You've got the New England, who claimed or clinched the second seed after beating Miami Dolphins, but then everyone could beat the Miami Dolphins, so that's fine. So they're going to play 7th seed LA Chargers, who we've just lost to Denver.
Yeah.
You've got the Jacksonville Jaguars, claimed 3rd seed. They're going to be against Buffalo, which I think is probably the most exciting looking playoff game in the AFC.
Yeah, that game. That's going to be interesting.
I'm really pleased for Jacksonville that they got into the playoffs. I think it's great. I think Cohen's potentially should be up for coach of the season. The way he's turned that franchise around, and now they welcome Josh Allen and co. That's going to be a fantastic game.
And the pressure on Josh Allen.
Huge pressure on Josh Allen. Absolutely huge. I mean, he is the elite player still in the AFC. Certainly at the quarterback position. And then the last game we've talked about is Houston and Pittsburgh. So I think it's a wide open position. And the interesting thing of this, certainly compared to the NFC, which we'll talk on in a second, every single team has a winning record in the AFC. That can't be the same, cannot be said in the NFC. But I've asked this every week so far. Out of the AFC, who's your favorite for the playoffs standing? Who's the favorite, to go to Super Bowl from the AFC as we look at it today?
Do you know what? I do like the Patriots. I do.
Yeah.
I do like.
Well, I personally don't like the Patriots, but it's not what they look like. It's a Dolphins, and I have to not. And the fact that they beat the week. I now owe our friend out in America, Mr. Matt Matake. I owe him well, no, I don't want to rub my nose in it. I owe him a bottle of whiskey now, as it is anyway. But yeah,
he will be in ecstatic mode. Absolutely.
I will try and get Matt on. I will try and get Matt on. But yeah, so you like the Patriots?
I like the Patriots because I think that Drake May has been consistent this whole season. I can't think of a game that he's played where I'd be like, I don't know about him, right? And sometimes, that's good enough, right? You just need to, because I think teams cannot just focus and say, oh, let's see if Drake May can beat us, kind of thing. Let's shut down everything else and see if Drake May can beat us, because he's shown that he can win it for them. He can lean on his team. He can lean on the defense, and they play hard. They really play hard. So I do like the Patriots. Going into the playoffs. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars beating the Broncos would have given them very good confidence, because that was their one good win. That was the win that helped them answer some questions, because before then they had lost to some really good teams. They had lost to Seattle, a playoff team. They had lost to the Rams, a playoff team. So beating, the number one seed in your own side of the conference, I think it's going to give them confidence, going into that game against the Bills. So, hey, Bills need to watch out.
No, I would say, look, I've always said Bills. I've always said Bills, obviously, from the start. So I'm not going to change on that. I agree on the Patriots. I think the Patriots are looking good. My one concern about the Patriots is they have had a fairly gentle schedule, which I think has been said by a lot of people. So I'm not being a bitter Dolphins fan saying that. But well, maybe a little. Mike Vrabel, Coach of the Year candidate again. Drake May, MVP candidate. None of that is all true. The one team that I am liking the look of at the moment is the Houston Texans. Because they're obviously down such a hot streak at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's said by every single person who knows a lot more about football than we do, is defense wins championships.
They do.
And I think they can shut down Pittsburgh. We may be wrong on that. They can shut down, but they've got this sort of 5th seed position. So again, it's all going to vary. It's all going to change based on who they play. But I can't see them coming up against. I can't see them being the lowest ranked team in the next round. I can see them causing some upsets.
Wow.
I can see them causing some upsets. And it wouldn't surprise me if they defend their way to the Super Bowl, and that'd be fair play. So I think they're someone worth watching out.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There is a story there about the Texans. Obviously beating the Jacksonville Jaguars in the last game, a team in their division. You're kind of thinking, yeah, okay, because they play the Steelers, and I think they'll be favored, right? I don't think anyone's going to be picking the Steelers to beat the Texans. So if they come out of that game, they depending on what happens between Jacksonville Jaguars and Bills, they could be facing anyone that comes out from that Patriots or Broncos side of things, and yeah, it could be interesting. It's the Houston Texans, they're interesting, and the fact that they overcome a 19-point deficit in that last game to win. It's the kind of resilience that you need in the playoffs, because you can blink and you could be 10 points down, right? But someone said something about the way that NFL players look at scores now in the NFL. I think it was Mike Florio, from Pro Football Focus, or he was saying something like the boys that now they look at 21 3 touchdowns as like 3-0, like the way that you look at our football game. They don't look at it as 21 points. They look at it as 3-0.
Yeah, it's a three score game.
Yes. So and when you look at it, it does something to your head when you think about it as 3-0 rather than 21-0. So that means that you just need to score one. Now you're 2-1. And you know what they say about 2-1 in football, and it's like the next goal just changes the momentum. So you score that next touchdown, and next thing you're 21-14, and then the other team starts to panic a little bit.
Yeah, but you need a defense that's going to be good enough to stop you conceding as well, and I think the Texans have that. But I think let's move on to the NFC. But before we do, I think we need to give a quick shout out to Myles Garrett.
Yeah,
obviously in the AFC broke the record for the single most. Was it the most sacks in a single season by a single player?
Yeah.
Fair play to him. He's far too good for the Cleveland team.
What are you doing there? That's my question.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
So it will be interesting to see. I mean, you can look at it two ways. He's done this for a poor team, but does that therefore mean that does that make it better? Right, that he's done it for such a poor team, and therefore you've got the offense. All the offense will be looking to try and do is avoid Garrett, but he's still been able to break through and get those sacks.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
is it ultimately meaningless because he's not doing it for a team who are competing in playoffs, competing for Super Bowls?
No, I think he will get into the Hall of Fame. I think once you get a record like that, that just cements you into the Hall of Fame. Now, the question for him is, does he care about trophies? All right, does he want to win a Super Bowl? Because if he does, now, of course, I mean, now the Browns have sacked their coach. All right, so Stefanski is gone. They've got decisions to make on quarterback. Is it going to be Shador? Is there going to be somebody else, which the new coach has got to sort out when he comes in? And I think that would be key, right, for Myles Garrett, because I think if it looks like they're bringing in another coach that maybe is not respected or something like that, because I'm kind of thinking of who they can potentially bring in. He might be thinking to himself, okay, I think, I've done all I can, for this franchise, and do right by me and trade me. So yeah, I think it could be that kind of scenario.
No, absolutely. Like he deserves to play for a better team, but you sign a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract, you've kind of screwed yourself. But okay, look, let's go into the NFC now. And look, we've already been recording for nearly 45 minutes, so we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on this one. But the headline, I suppose, from the weekend, we talked about the fact that Carolina pipped Tampa Bay to the 4th seed.
Fair play to them.
Fair play, but their 4th seed with a losing record. That's a different debate for another time. Let's just briefly, and I mean briefly, let's touch on the team who clinched the top seed at Seattle Seahawks, who beat the 49ers in sort of like winner takes top seed kind of game in the end. And it's Seattle who did this. And I know before we recorded, you were sounding off about the disrespect that Sam Darnold gets. So I'll let you have your little rant about that now.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that Sam Darnold has probably, if there was a award for the most underrated player in NFL history, I think that's got to be him. You go into a franchise like the Minnesota Vikings and you take them, to the number 1 seed, in the NFC. winning, 14 games. You everyone is like, well, was it more of the coach? It's a good coach there in the Vikings. Justin Jefferson's there. Sam Darnold, did what he choked, in the playoffs. And that's fair accusation because he didn't play very well in the playoffs and that last game. But then he goes over to Seattle. And what does he do? He does exactly the same thing. Takes them on a magical winning run, gets the number one seed, in the NFC. And at some point, you've got to say, well, he can't be a bad quarterback. And I think he's more than, an average quarterback. I think you've got to say that. You've got to look at, all the quarterbacks there and you say, well, would people say, is he better than Jordan Love? I know people will say, the instant reaction will be like, no, Jordan Love is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold. But is he really? Because you could argue that, the Green Bay Packers have got probably someone who's renowned as a much better coach, probably a much better team in terms of, what they do season in and season out. So, why would Jordan Love be better than Sam Darnold? Right. Okay, Baker Mayfield. That's another quarterback that was in an MVP conversation. And throughout this year, nobody has put Sam Darnold in the MVP conversation. I don't hear anyone talk about him in the MVP conversation. They talk about everybody else. At some point, Baker Mayfield was in the MVP conversation.
He was. So he was.
And is he better than, Baker Mayfield? I would say so. You then start to look at, other quarterbacks. Don't ask me, whether he's better than, Jalen Hurts, because you know what I'm going to say. You know what I'm going to say. I'll say most quarterbacks are better than Jalen Hurts, even though he wins.
Is he better than Dak Prescott?
Is he better than Dak Prescott? Of course not.
There we go.
Of course he's not better than Dak Prescott. But listen, right, you could argue that, Sam Darnold has done a lot more than Dak Prescott has done. Now, the only thing I would say is that Dak Prescott has actually won 13 games, right, in his career. And
is that all he's won? He's only won 13. I know it's felt like a while since you've done anything, but I'm sure he's won more than 13 games in his career.
He has, but I mean, in a single season, he's won 13 games. And he's actually won, 12 games in 3 consecutive seasons. So you've got to be like, okay, there is amount of respect. And listen, if Dak Prescott was in a team other than the Dallas Cowboys, I think he would have won a Super Bowl by now. Because I think the sabotage that happens in the Dallas Cowboys is on a different stratosphere.
Yeah, go on, Eddie. Let's keep Cowboys corner to a minimum this week.
But yeah, I think Sam Darnold deserves his flowers. I think people need to start giving me a little bit of respect. And I know that everyone is waiting to see him fall to his face in the playoffs. And I think that's what everyone is waiting for. Everyone is on pumpkin watch, see him turn into a pumpkin in the playoffs.
Well, look, mate, let's see. He's got the first seed. Fair play to the Seahawks. But let's talk about obviously the team that they beat, the 49ers. They finished 6th seed, and they play your beloved Philadelphia Eagles. And I think this is the funny one. I mean, so Philadelphia have taken the 3rd seed. Now they could have had the 2nd seed because Chicago lost 19-16 to the Lions, who haven't made the playoffs. This gave the Philadelphia Eagles a chance to claim that 2nd seed, but then they went and lost to the Washington Commanders. So they now play, they're at home against the 49ers, who have a better record than them. And it's Chicago who welcome the Green Bay Packers. Now, I'm not saying that the 49ers is necessarily a harder game than Green Bay Packers, but this was an opportunity to take a second seed that they kind of just gave up. Really, it was a bit of an odd move.
Yeah. And I think it was intentional.
You think?
Yeah, I have a feeling that they probably fancied their chances against the 49ers than the Green Bay Packers.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you remember that game that they played against the Green Bay Packers, remember it was a very hard game. It was a single digit score game that, they only just squeaked past, the Green Bay Packers. So I don't think they would have wanted to see the Green Bay Packers again. Now, you look at the 49ers, and yes, they've had a great run, going into the playoffs. But they don't necessarily have everyone, right? And you could argue that their wins going into the last stretch were not against difficult teams, right? They beat the Cardinals, beat the Panthers, beat the Browns, they beat the Titans, beat the Colts, right? The one win that the 49ers had that made people thought, okay, serious win was the Bears, right? They beat the Bears, right? But that game was a close call, right? Could have gone in any direction, that game. So I think that the Eagles probably thought to themselves, we're probably a better matchup with the 49ers, because the 49ers have got CMC, right? And he's arguably, Christian McCaffrey is just one of one, right? He's leading the 49ers in both rushing yards and receiving yards. And that's just ridiculous, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they'll probably be thinking to themselves, if we shut down CMC, right, we probably have a chance, right? Brock Purdy, Matt Jones, whoever it is that shows up, in that playoff, we probably have a better chance. So I think that's probably why they were not worried about, either, going, because either way, right, they were still going to play at home. So they would have looked at it and said, well, you know what, we're still going to get home field advantage in that first game because we won our division. And maybe as a matchup, the 49ers are a better matchup for them than the Green Bay Packers. So they probably took a calculated gamble, which I hope that comes back to bite them in the butt.
Absolutely. Well, let's round off the NFC then. So we saw that Seattle claim first place.
Yeah.
The other matches, you've got the Rams, who are fifth seed, travel to Carolina, who we've talked about, the only team in the playoffs with a losing record. And then you've got Green Bay go to Chicago, and you've got the 49ers go to Philly, as we've just discussed. So again, we talked about it in the AFC. Let's do it on the NFC. Which team do you look at, do you think are the favorites to go through to the Super Bowl from the NFC?
This is a tough one. So it's a tough one. Because I think if you had asked me a couple of weeks ago, I would have been looking at the Rams. But
yeah, same.
But I don't know. They've been looking a little bit shaky in offense, recently. So it's kind of making me, doubt them a little bit. Do you know what? I'm gonna stick my head out, and this is a real bold claim. I'm gonna say that the number one seed in the NFC makes it to the into the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Seattle makes it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think that's it. They're all reasonable shouts. I mean, obviously, I've said the Rams now for a number of weeks, but the form in the past few weeks has made me doubt them a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm still going to say the Rams because that's who I said before. Because I look at it and I think for me, the Rams is the only team that I look at who I can say who I think are guaranteed or is my sort of lock of the week to go through to the next round.
Yeah.
because I think Green Bay, Chicago, I think that can go either way. I think 49ers and the Eagles could go either way. I can't see Carolina, as well as they've done to get there, I can't see them beating the Rams. So I think for the Panthers, it's just nice for them to get an invitation, but they're going to be one and done.
They're going to be.
But beyond that, I think any team who gets through, they've all got strengths, but they've also got a lot of question marks against them. You know, Green Bay, Chicago, Philly, 49ers, even the Seahawks, they've all got significant question marks against them. So it's not as clear cut as I thought this was going to be recently. Previously, I've said before that I was thinking it was going to be Rams and Buffalo in the Super Bowl. I'm not too confident in that prediction anymore. But the one thing to say is, a player football throws up all manner of surprises, stories. This is what everybody's trying to. We've basically wasted 18 weeks just getting to this point, haven't we? Let's be honest. Now this is where things really get interesting. Exactly. But look, let's end the episode there. I think that's enough for this week. I think it's fair to say. The regular season is wrapped up. We're now in the middle of playoff football. Eddie and I will be back to do our predictions to see if Eddie can claw back some dignity in his predictions as we go into the playoffs.
You need to go double points in playoffs.
Oh yeah, sure. Whatever he said. Yeah, triple points. But yeah, look, thank you for sticking with us as we go through this. Great to be back talking to you again, Eddie, as always. But for now, as always, take us home.
Yeah, so the musical chairs music has stopped, and lots of people now have to leave the dance because they didn't have a chair. And the playoffs is when real football starts. This is where legends are made, legacies are driven, and if you want to get that gold jacket, you need to start making hay in the playoffs. And there are lots of people who are right now looking at themselves and thinking, hey, this is our time to shine. So we'll be there to watch the games, and I'm really looking forward to this weekend because just like anything else, there, all of a sudden, there will only be a few teams left. It would be it's crazy. But guys, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, please. As much as we do this, we do feed off your energy and your support on the channel, and it'd be good to hear some comments. We're kind of getting to that point where we are reflecting on the season, on the podcast, the channel. Let us know things that you love, that you want us to continue, and things that you want to give us some feedback about. We'll appreciate all of that. Until the next time that we'll see you for our predictions and the wildcard weekend. Have a good one, and we'll see you across the gridiron. I'm the bad guy. I'm the